The sun dips below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows that dance in the fading light. Walking home alone can be a peaceful end to a long day, a chance to clear your head and enjoy the quiet. But sometimes that quiet is shattered, replaced by the creeping dread that you're not alone. Tonight we delve into the darkness with 3 terrifying tales of people whose walks home turned into nightmares. These are their stories, recounted from emails and messages, brought to life in chilling detail through animation. We hear their fear, feel their isolation, and witness the moments that chilled them to the bone. So dim the lights, turn up the volume, and prepare yourself, because what you're about to hear is truly unsettling.
Imagine yourself walking home after a late shift at work. The streets are quiet, streetlights casting an orange glow that does little to pierce the darkness. Our story begins on a night like this, with a young woman named Sarah making her way home. As Sarah walked, she noticed it. A shadow stretched long and distorted by the streetlights, moving parallel to her on the other side of the street. At first, she dismissed it, telling herself it was just the outline of a tree branch swaying in the wind. But as she continued walking, the shadow remained. With each step, a knot of unease tightened in Sarah's stomach. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. She snuck a glance over her shoulder. The shadow was still there, moving with her, mimicking her every move. Fear turned her blood to ice. This was no ordinary shadow. It was too big, too defined, too deliberate in its movements. It was as if something was trying to stay hidden, concealed by the darkness, yet always watching her. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She had to get off the street, find somewhere safe. She spotted a brightly lit gas station up ahead and made a beeline for it, her shadow self keeping pace across the street. As she reached the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station, she risked another look. The shadow was gone. Relief washed over her, but it was a fleeting feeling. Something wasn't right. She decided to call a cab from inside the gas station, unwilling to risk walking alone again. As she waited, she glanced nervously out the window. And that's when she saw it again. The shadow. It was back, lurking at the edge of the gas station's light, its form shifting and swirling. It was waiting for her. Panic welled up inside her. She felt trapped, exposed. Just then, her cab pulled up. She practically leapt into the back seat, her eyes glued to the receding figure of the gas station attendant in the rearview mirror, terrified to take her eyes off the shadow for even a second. As the cab pulled away, she thought she saw the shadow begin to move, stretching and reaching towards her, as if trying to follow. She didn't look back. Even after she was safely inside her apartment, the image of that shadow, clinging to the edge of the light, stayed with her. She never saw it again. But the memory of that night, the feeling of being watched, followed, hunted by something she couldn't explain, continued to haunt her every step.
Our next story takes us to the suburbs, where quiet streets can sometimes feel even more menacing under the cover of darkness. This is the story of David, a man who learned that the most terrifying sounds are often the ones you don't hear. David was walking home from a friend's house one evening. It was a warm summer night, and the air was thick with the smell of freshly cut grass. The only sounds were the crickets chirping and the distant hum of traffic. As he rounded a corner onto his street, he thought he heard something. Footsteps. They were soft, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. He paused, holding his breath, listening intently. Silence. He shrugged it off, attributing it to his imagination, but as he continued walking, the footsteps returned. This time there was no mistaking it. Someone was following him. He glanced over his shoulder, but the street was deserted. Just him and the rows of silent houses, their windows dark and lifeless. He picked up his pace, his heart starting to race. The footsteps kept pace with his own, always a few steps behind, close enough to hear, but far enough away to remain unseen. He thought about running, but something held him back. He didn't want to seem scared, to acknowledge whatever was behind him. He told himself it was just a late-night jogger or a neighbor walking their dog, but deep down, a primal fear began to gnaw at him. He reached the corner of his street, his house just a block away. He could see the porch light casting a warm glow on the sidewalk. Just a little further, he thought. He quickened his pace, his breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The footsteps grew louder, closer. He could feel the presence of whoever or whatever was behind him, a palpable weight pressing down on him. He risked another glance over his shoulder, but there was still no one there. He fumbled for his keys, his hands trembling. He reached his front door and jammed the key into the lock, the metallic click echoing. in the stillness. He flung the door open and practically threw himself inside, slamming the door shut behind him. He leaned against the door, his heart pounding in his chest, listening intently. Silence. The footsteps were gone. He peered out the window, but the street was empty. There was no sign of anyone or anything. He stood there for a long time, staring out into the darkness, the silence deafening. He never figured out who or what was following him that night, but the memory of those silent footsteps, echoing his every move, stayed with him long after he stepped inside his house. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes the things that go bump in the night prefer to remain unseen, their presence felt, but never fully revealed.
Chapter 3: The Vanishing Stranger.
Our final story takes us to the heart of the city, where the constant hum of activity can sometimes mask the most unsettling encounters. This is the story of Emily, a young woman who learned that not all who are lost want to be found.
I was walking home from a late movie, my mind still buzzing from the film's suspenseful plot. As I turned down a side street, a shortcut I often took, I noticed a figure standing under a flickering streetlight. It was a man dressed in a dark coat, his face obscured by the shadows. He seemed to be staring at me, and as I got closer, he stepped forward, his hand outstretched.
"Excuse me," he said, his voice raspy, as if he hadn't spoken in days. "I seem to be lost. Can you tell me how to get to Elm Street?"
I hesitated. Something about the man made me uneasy. Maybe it was his disheveled appearance or the desperate edge to his voice. But I reminded myself that it was late, and he was probably just a tired traveler in need of directions.
"Elm Street is actually a few blocks in the opposite direction," she said, pointing back the way she'd come. "Just go back down this street and take a right at the next corner."
"The opposite direction?" he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. He sounded confused, disoriented.
"Yes," Emily confirmed. "Are you sure you're okay? Do you need me to call you a cab?"
The man shook his head slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. No cab. Thank you for your help," he mumbled, turning away from me and melting back into the shadows. I continued on my way, a strange feeling settling over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right about the encounter. The man's desperation seemed genuine, but there was something about his eyes, a coldness, a hollowness, that sent a shiver down my spine. I reached the corner and glanced back. The man was gone. I paused, scanning the street, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I shook my head, attributing it to my overactive imagination. But as I continued walking, I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched, followed by unseen eyes. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached my apartment building and fumbled with my keys, eager to get inside. As I stepped into the safety of my apartment, I glanced back one last time. And that's when I saw him. The man was standing across the street, his back to me, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. He was staring up at my window, his silhouette illuminated by the streetlight. I froze, my blood turning to ice. I blinked, and he was gone. I never saw the man again, but the memory of his vanishing act, the way he seemed to appear and disappear at will, haunted me. It was a chilling reminder that sometimes the people we encounter on the street are not who they appear to be, and some encounters are best left unexplained.
As we've heard tonight, the walk home alone can be a perilous journey. The shadows seem to deepen, the silence amplifies every sound, and the familiar streets can transform into a breeding ground for fear. While we may never fully understand the nature of these encounters, they serve as a chilling reminder to always be aware of our surroundings. What did you think of tonight's stories? Have you ever experienced something similar on your own walks home? Share your own spine-tingling encounters in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. If you enjoyed tonight's journey into the darkness, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more terrifying tales, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, stay safe out there.